if work is taking your soul away, you got to watch this Martha Stewart documentary. But let's talk about why. The reason I say why is because of pivots. Martha Stewart had many pivots in her career, many pivots throughout her life. And I believe on the documentary, it talks about how she was a stockbroker in the 60s. In the 1960s, it's 2024. And in the 1960s, Martha Stewart was one of the few women working on Wall Street as a stockbroker, according to the documentary. So let's say, if you really think about that, how successful she already was in the 1960s. They also say in the documentary that as a stockbroker, she was making $250,000 a year. I know some people who work in New York, in the banks, on Wall Street, in LA, in many high profile jobs, and they're making $250,000 now. Imagine making $250,000 in the 1960s. So Martha Stewart was very successful. And then lo and behold, of course, stock went up and the stock went down. A lot of people lost money, and she decided to pivot. But here's the thing: most people in that type of space, they don't pivot. They either disappear, go away for a little while, they try to stay below their means, and they just try to stretch their money and try to do something else in the same industry. Martha Stewart, she pivoted, right? Or they try to get a new job. But Martha Stewart, she pivoted. She didn't try to get another job in the same industry. She didn't try to lay low and just live below her means. She pivoted. She moved and she really got into homemaking. Now, think about this pivot, right? From being one of the few women working on Wall Street as a stockbroker to now homemaking. Yes, she's a woman and you can get into all the traditional roles and all that, but imagine the extremes, right? So listen to the extreme, going from being one of these uber successful women in corporate America to now she wants to focus on homemaking as a career. A lot of guys, married or not, have heard their women say this type of thing. And if not specifically from corporate America to homemaking, we've heard something, right? A coffee shop, or anything. And even if you're not a man, you just heard your friend, your sister, your family member, sisters have had these conversations, girlfriends have had these conversations amongst each other where they want to leave corporate America and start an events company. These are extremes, and Martha Stewart went through that extreme. And so this is not an extreme that is um, I would say, so out of the box that you can't do it. So hear me when I say this. Martha Stewart pivoted to something completely counter cultural of what she was doing. So when you look at this documentary, I really want you to see yourself in it. You can do it. You can go from being in something uber stressful and strict like professional services to going to an entertainment space. You can do something from going from something very free like a creative industry to going into something strict. You can go to the extremes in your pivot if you're dedicated or if you love it, whatever the case may be. But the pivot and the space between the pivot, the gap in knowledge or the gap in identity, it doesn't matter how far it is. If you're willing to do the work, if you want to do the work, if you're interested in it, I suggest that you at least see it out, entertain it, get educated in that space, and then really think it through and see if you want to go forward. Martha Stewart did an extreme pivot, stockbroker to homemaking. And that's in the 60s. And you have to understand that most of us born in the 80s don't even know Martha Stewart yet. We don't know her until the late 80s, 90s, going into the 2000s, right? So she was able to make this pivot and go into homemaking. And with the homemaking, what happened was she started throwing parties and she started catering parties. So she started the homemaking on a very grassroots level. Now, granted, her how should I say this? Her network and her surroundings of people were very different than your surroundings of people may be. You may not know a bunch of millionaires and billionaires, but that was just her surroundings. You can't negate the work and dismiss the work that she did because she could have just again laid low and just continued to live off the money she already made. And if she lost the money, she could have just got a job in the same industry. But hear what I'm saying. She started where she was and got to work. And listen to this too, because I always have a point and a counterpoint. Let's say you say, oh, okay, well, she knew a bunch of rich people. Imagine how hard it would be to go from being this super uber successful stockbroker to now you want to throw parties. Imagine how hard it would be to really get out of your ego to ask people and invite people into your space so that you could entertain them, to serve them. You go from being served to now serving people. There's multitudes of reasons why she wouldn't have, shouldn't have, and couldn't have done this, but she did it anyway. And so that's why I really want people to focus on this pivot was an extreme pivot, but she still went through it, regardless of the layers of finances and rich people and network, she actually took that extra step because people could have looked at her and looked down on her, and maybe they did, but she still took that pivot. She loved homemaking that much, and she decided to take what she liked and take her creativity, pour it into that space, and then she got to work, right? So when you pivot, you have to get to work. And in your immediate surroundings is the best way to do it. Again, she could have said, no, I have to go do something outside of my circle because my friends or my immediate circle may look down on me or I don't want to serve them. Whatever it is, she got outside of her ego and emotions in that setting and she got to work. She invited people to her space, to her house. She didn't wait till she had a ghost kitchen. She didn't wait till she had an event space. She didn't wait till she had a venue. She invited them to her house. Granted, again, we understand she has money and her house looks very different from your house, but you can clean up your backyard. You can open your garage. You can lift the garage door up, set it the middle part up fancy, and maybe have a little wall so they can't see the sides or something. You can make it work. And so what I'm saying is the pivot is not only one of the most important things, but the work after the pivot is as important as the pivot itself. A lot of us make the pivot and then we kind of stall out because our ego and emotions get in the way. But Martha Stewart did not do that. And that's really one of the main takeaways I had from this documentary. It was just her stick to itiveness because we haven't even gotten into going to jail. We haven't gotten into her reinventing herself and now being with Snoop Dogg and all those type of things into a different bucket again, if you think about it. But we're not going to go there. I really want you to look at her first or second pivot, whatever this may be in the documentary. But she went from being a successful stockbroker and success by societal standards. So I mean money, but she was stressed. She was drained. She liked making the money. Of course, she had a blast doing it. When you're making money, work is always fun. But also, she got to a point where when things went bad, she wanted to hit the eject button, like we all do. And when she hit the eject button, she went to the opposite end of the spectrum and made a pivot that has pretty much set her up for us to know the Martha Stewart that we know today, which is an 83-year-old super woman, super successful cultural phenomenon. And I'm not saying all those things to land in the space of that's what you have to be. But what I am saying is you can be a local phenomenon. You can be a statewide phenomenon. I think we all kind of get into this space of if it's not national, if it's not global attention, we don't want it. But when you think about the millions of people within your community, state, city, whatever, there's a financial opportunity there. There's almost an obligation for you to see it through. You have a dream and it's a very viable dream and you're in a space with thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. You can take that pivot and see it out. Now, of course, finances have to be factored in. Of course, work scheduling and all those things have to be factored in. But again, Martha Stewart said, I want to make homemaking famous. I want to make it normal. I want to make it popular. And she started in her home. She was entertaining people in her house. You may not have the best house. You know what you could do? Ask somebody to sponsor the event that you want to have and let them have your food or your event at their house or their event space. It may take something like that. You can get resourceful. You may not be able to, if you live in Atlanta, you may not be able to go to Buckhead or wherever the fancy place is still, but you can go somewhere and have an event that makes sense. That's all I'm saying. So make sure you continue to do that. Look for your resources, get resourceful, and then actually execute on your vision. It's in you, it's in us all. And most importantly, I just think that the everyday story is a lot closer to us than we think. But because some of these people are so financially successful or they're so far beyond just us in celebrity status that we tend to dismiss the idea of how relatable they are. I'm not saying that you have to relate to them as a person, but when you hear parts of their story, there's actually some gems in there that you can actually use to become better, or not even better, just help you encourage yourself on the path. So again, check out the documentary. I think it was good, especially if you're somebody in a 9 to 5 setting looking to make a pivot into a different space because work is getting on your nerves. If work's getting on your nerves, we all have been there. So yeah, check it out, man. Lady, check it all out. And if you have any documentaries that you think I should check out, let me know. Leave a comment below and we'll get to it. I'll do a review on that one too.